Dear students, today we are going to study Module 3, which consists of arrays, one-dimensional and two-dimensional arrays, character arrays, and strings, basic algorithms, searching and storing algorithms like linear search, binary search, bubble sort, and selection sort. So let's start with introduction to array. Sometimes it is necessary for the programmer to store and process large volume of similar type of data elements in computer memory while solving complex problems using a computer system, and is possible by using derived data type array. So what do we mean by derived data type? Derived data type is the aggregation of fundamental data types like character, integer, float, and void. They are fundamental data types, whereas derived data types is aggregation of fundamental data types. So pointers, arrays, structures, and unions are derived data types. So for example, to store roll number of 100 students in computer memory, we define only one array, that is int roll number of 100, instead of defining 100 separate variables. Now if I want to store roll number of 100 students, instead of storing the 100 roll numbers separately, we are going to use here arrays. Now let's see the second example. Now to store average mark of 100 students in computer memory, we define only one array, that is float average of 100, instead of defining 100 separate variables. I'm not going to use different variables for storing 100 separate values. Instead of that, I can store all the 100 values under one name called average. Okay. Now to store name of one student, that is, if I'm going to store the name of the student, it is a character type of data. So say character name 25. So this is an array which is capable of storing 25 characters. So let's see what is an array. An array can be defined as a collection of related data elements of similar data types stored in computer's continuous memory. The data elements can be processed by using a common name and different index value that starts from 0 and ends with array size -1. Okay, I will explain it much easier using this. Okay, now array means it is a continuous memory location, okay, which has a common name. So there can be many memory location. Let's say for example, we will take roll number. Now I want to store roll number 1, roll number 2, 3, 4. So to store roll number 1, 2, 3, 4, I might declare as roll number 1 variable roll number 1, okay, roll number 2, this is 1, 2, roll number 3, so on. Okay. Now each of them might have taken different memory locations like roll number 1, roll number 2, roll number 3, roll number 4, so on. They might be at a different memory locations. Now, using an array, what we are trying to do is, I'm trying to store all these in continuous memory location. Instead of storing them at a different location, now I will be storing in continuous memory location. And this continuous memory, I am going to give a single name called roll number. So instead of saying roll number 1, roll number 2, roll number 3 and 4, I can give the whole set of memory as roll number. Okay, then how do I differentiate the values in the memory? If I give a common name, how do I differentiate? Now first of all, let's see. Now these memory or these values which I am going to store in the memories are called as elements. So this is an array. An array is continuous memory location which contains same type of data. So all are either integer or float or character. So I can store similar type of data in an array. Remember that. Okay. So array is defined with the same name and it is indicated by square bracket like this. How many values I am able to store? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 becomes the size of the array. Okay. Now how do I differentiate the elements? If I want to access the first element in the array, then I have to write it as I have to differentiate with its index value. What is index value? Index value differentiates the elements of the array. So always index value starts with 0. So first element index value is 0, followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. That is why we say the array element starts from 0 index and up till where it goes? It goes up to array size minus 1, that is 5 minus 1. So index always starts with 0 and it expands up to array size minus 1. Okay. Let me close it down. Okay. Okay. Now let's say I want to access the first element in the array. Then I have to say as roll number of 0. So array element 0. So when I represent it in this fashion, we can access the first element of the array, that is at the 0th index. Suppose if I want to access an element which is stored at this location, how do I represent it? I write it as roll number of 3 in square bracket. So I'll be able to access the element that is stored here. Okay. So I hope you got to know what do we mean by array. What is index? Index always starts with 0 and the limit is up to array size minus 1. Okay. So that's what the definition says. The data elements can be processed by using a common name like roll number and different index values that start from 0 and ends with array size -1. Okay, so let's see here one example. An array to store 100 integer values. I want to store 100 integer values. Always remember, all the elements of an array should be of same data type. So I am going to declare an array called A. This array is going to store 100 different integers. So I have to declare it as the size of the array is 100. So what type of data it is going to store? It is going to store integer type of data. So when I write like this, an array is created in the memory which is given a name as A. It starts from index 0 up to the size of the array -1, that is 100 -1 up to 99. So I am able to store values right from index 0 up to 99, that is 100 elements. Similarly, if I am going to store 100 floating point numbers, I have to just declare it as float. I am going to take a different array called B, which is having a size 100, that is 100 elements can be stored, and the data that can be stored are of the type float. So similar to this, I can also create an array. Say for example, I want to store the name of a single student. Then I'll say name is the name of the array. It is capable of storing 25 characters. Okay, the data type is character. Now, whenever we are going to use character type of data, now remember, though the size of the array is 25, the index of the array ends with 24, but the last element in character type of array is represented by a null. I will show you here what do you mean by that in the next slide. Okay, well, let me clear it off so that you'll understand. Okay, whenever I am declaring an array, say character type of array called name, which is going to store 5 or 25, let's say 5 characters. Okay, so this will be the 0th element, this will be the first element, second element, third element, and the fourth element. Okay, it means it is capable of storing 5 different characters. So whenever it is character type of array, always remember the last element, it will contain /0, which we call as a null character, that is to indicate the end of the character. Okay, though I declare array size is 5, I may not be using all the 5 locations in the memory. Say for example, I have declared the array size as 25. If I declare array size as 25, right from 0, 1, 2, it will be up to 24. Okay. Up to 24 elements. Now, if say for example, I am going to store the name as Ravi. Just a minute. Okay. Now let's say character type of array called name, which is capable of storing 25 characters. So an array is created which is capable of storing 25 characters. So the last element will be, index will be 24. Okay. Now I want to store the name as Ravi. Okay. So the first character R will be stored in the first element of the array, A here, V, I. Okay. Now how about the remaining? Because the size of the array is 25. The remaining elements or the remaining space of the memory in the array is not used. So to indicate that this is the end of this character, the character in an array, we use /0, which we call as a null character. So it automatically stores as a /0 to indicate it is the end of the array or character array. Okay. So let's see here. An array to store book name. I just showed you here. This is one more example. Similarly, the name of the author. Okay. Now let's see what are types of arrays. The arrays can be classified according to the volume of data to be stored in computer memory. How much volume of data I am going to store, whether I am going to store a one-dimensional value or two-dimensional value or a three-dimensional value. If I am going to store one-dimensional value, I call it as a one-dimensional array. So for example, one-dimensional array is indicated by int a in square brackets, simply the size of the array. If it is a two-dimensional array, then I have to indicate with two square brackets inside which I am going to give the size, that is length and the width. Now similarly, multi-dimensional array will have more than two square brackets while defining the array. Now let's see one-dimensional array. One-dimensional array can be defined as a collection of related data elements of the same data type stored in computer's consecutive memory. As I already told you, an array is nothing but we are going to store same type of data in continuous memory location. The array elements can be accessed by using a common name with a different index that start with 0 and ends with array size -1. It helps to store and process linear list of data elements. Now, how do we declare one-dimensional array? One-dimensional array must be declared or defined in the declaration part of the main before the array elements are used in the executable part of the main by using following syntax. The declaration has to be done before we use the array. The syntax is data type, name of the array, then the size of the array. Okay, the data type can be the data type of data to be stored and processed in the computer's memory, it can be integer, float, character, double, long, int, etc. Array name, it should be a valid identifier. Size, the integer constant indicating maximum number of data elements can be stored. So the size indicates the maximum number of data elements that can be stored. Let's see one example. Now if I am going to declare int a of 5, it means the name of the array is a. It is going to store integer type of data. How many elements it can store, how many data values it can store? It can store 5 different values. Okay. So you can see here index always starts with 0 to size minus 1. So how many spaces are created in an array? 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. That is the size of the array. Similarly, float price. So the price is the name of the array which is going to store floating type of value. How many values it can store? It is capable of storing 5 different values. Okay. So same way I have shown here how the array will be created with the index value from 0 to 4. Similarly, we have, or we can declare double, character. Okay. What you need to note is computer allocates 5 memory location with garbage values. Now whenever I declare an array, what are the contents of this array? They are unknown values which we call as a garbage values. Okay. Now initializing one-dimensional array. The process of assigning the values to the defined array elements is called initialization of array. The arrays can be initialized with the values in the following 2 ways. First is compile time array initialization or runtime array initialization. So I can initialize the array values either at the compile time or during the runtime. Now let's see compile time array initialization. If the value are well known by programmers, then the values during the declaration of array, in the declaration part of main, is called compile time initialization. What does it mean? It means that if the user knows what are the values of the array while declaring the array itself, then he will initialize them at the declaration time itself. So we will see an example so that we will understand. So what is the syntax? Syntax is data type, array name, size of the array equal to list of values separated by commas. You can see here int a of 5. This is the declaration. While declaration itself, I am going to initialize what should be the value of the elements of the array. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, it is known to the programmer. So he can write it while declaring the array itself. Or we can also write as a of 0 is equal to 10, a of 1 equal to 20, a of 2 is equal to 30, a of 3 is equal to 40, a of 4 is equal to 50. Okay. So which also means the same. That is, an array A is going to contain 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 as its elements. Similarly, I can also declare float price of array and I can initialize the values. So this is how the values are going to be stored in the different elements of the array. Now let's see if I am going to have character type of array. Now say for example character array, the name of the array is name and the size is 5, that is it is capable of storing 5 different characters. Or I can also initialize the values of the array as directly giving in double quotes or giving them separately as in single quotes closed in like JOHN. Or as I told you, I can directly give it like this. See here, I have not given the size of the array. If I don't write the size of the array and I write the values that should be stored in character type of array, it will automatically initialize the size. So if you can see here, JOHN is stored in the array name, and to indicate this is the end of the array, it automatically puts a null character, that is /0. Okay. Now if I am going to store only one character, but the size I have declared already 5, then you can see here it is going to store J and the remaining elements of the array are indicated as null characters, means empty, they contain nothing. Okay. Similarly, if I am going to store, I am going to use integer type of array and the values I want to initialize to 0, I can write them separately like this, or I can give it in a single curly braces as 0. So it will initialize all the elements as 0. If only 2 values are going to be used in this integer type of array, only those 2 values you can see, and the remaining will be 0. Okay. Now see here, I have declared integer type of array A whose size is 3. Size is 3 means it is capable of storing 3 values. Whereas I am initializing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 values, which is an invalid operation. So that is why it will indicate as too many initialization, invalid operation. Now let's see runtime array initialization. If the value are not known by programmer in advance, then the programmer makes the use of runtime initialization. It helps the programmer to read unknown values from end users of a program by the keyboard by using input functions like scanf, getch, and getS, etc. Okay, so it is more user friendly. So let's see here. To read and display 5 integer values from a keyboard by using an array is the problem. The problem is to read and display 5 integer values from a keyboard using an array. So as you know, always program starts with #include stdio.h. I am using here include conio.h because I am going to use here clear screen. So My program begins with void main, opening and closing brace. Now inside the main program, I am having declaration part, that is integer array of 5, and I have one more integer value variable I. I am using clear screen. Now I am saying printf enter any 5 integer values. So for I is equal to 0 up to 5. Since I am counting it from 0, I can write here I less than 5. I am incrementing I value each time the loop happens. Okay. Now scanf %d. Okay. Scanf %d ampersand a of I. What does it mean? What is the value of I? I value is 0 initially. So a of 0. In a of 0, I am saying store the first value. So if, say for example 10, if the output looks like this, enter any 5 integer values. You are going to type as 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Then the first value 10 will be stored where? It will be stored at a of 0. Okay. Now once the loop is executed, it will check is I less than 5. Now before it goes to check what is the value of I is automatically incremented by 1. So is I less than 5? Yes, it is less than 5. So scanf is performed again. So this goes on until the value of I becomes equal to 5. Right? As long as it is less than 5, this loop is executed. When I becomes equal to 5, it will come out of the loop. So the 5 different values are stored at 5 different locations of array, because the value of array keeps on changing as the value of I changes. A of 0, A of 1, A of 2, so on up to 4. When I becomes 5, automatically it comes out of the for loop. Now to print the value, I need one more for loop. Here also I am going to start with index 0 up to 4. Okay. So I am saying print the value A of I. So each time the value of I keeps on changing, A of I will go on printing different elements of the array. Get ch and end of the program. A second example, to read and display n integer values from a keyboard by using an array. Just like the previous program, here we are going to start with the header file stdio.h and include conio.h, then void main. Then I am going to declare an array A which has a size 50, and I need a variable I for indexing, and n is the count, that is the number of elements I am going to read in the array, integers that I am going to store in the array. Clear screen and print enter n. N is the count, so you can see here enter n. N is equal to 7. If n is equal to 7, now I am saying scanf, read the element and store it in the variable n. Then I am saying printf enter n integer values. So it will print on the screen, enter 7 integer values. Then to read the 7 elements, I am writing one for loop which starts from I is equal to 0 up to I is equal to less than n. Inside the for loop, we are writing scanf %d ampersand a of I. So each time the value of I changes, the elements of a of I goes on storing the entered values as 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 and 70. So once the value of I becomes equal to 7, the for loop exits, and now we can say printf array elements. To print the array elements, one more for loop is used, which also starts from I is equal to 0 up to I less than n. And we are going to print the elements as print %d a of I and get ch. Okay, so this is an example of, one more example of how to initialize an array and how to read the elements into an array. I have given some more assignment questions like what is one-dimensional array, explain its declaration and initialization with syntax and example. Second question, what is two-dimensional array, explain its declaration and initialization with syntax and example. Write a C program to implement bubble sort technique. Write a C program to find largest of n numbers. Write a C program to read n integers into an array A and to find the sum of odd numbers, find the sum of even numbers, find the average of all numbers. Outputs the result computed with appropriate heading. Sixth one, write a program to multiply two arrays of given order A of m into n and B of p into q. Now as we haven't studied how to declare two-dimensional array and how to perform multiplication on arrays, we shall see it in the next video. Thank you.